Hey, FOT Nation, it's Tim Sackett, and I am back with another bonus edition of HR Famous this time we're bringing on a fellow writer of FOT, William Wiggins. William wrote a post for Black History Month where we'll get into it, but it was good. You enjoy it, and you can actually read it 'cause it's part of this
hmm
video. It's kind of embedded within there. William, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're working currently, what your role is, all that good stuff.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Good to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm William Wiggins, and I am the Human Resources Director for an organization called SEIU Benefits Group here in Seattle. We handle benefits and education services for National Home Healthcare Workers Union, and it's really good work. I get to work with a lot of former organizers and a lot of millennials and Gen Zers, and it's a really good place to be right now.
Well, and right now within home health, like for the last year plus with the COVID stuff, you guys have been right in the mix of frontline workers and everything going on with all of that.
We really have, and we have had to adapt in ways really quickly due to COVID that I don't think any of us thought we were capable of, but it's going pretty smoothly.
All right. Well, let's get into the post so we can have some conversation around it. So, the gist of the post, and again, people are going to read it, so I'm not going to kind of go through every single part of it. I want you and I to have a conversation about it. But you were kind of calling out leaders, white leaders specifically, around, hey, what? And I'm looking at the post over on the other screen, not looking at you. Why did, or why, why do we do so well, or at least better, when we talk about scheduling holiday stuff for Independence Day, Cinco de Mayo, blah blah blah, all of that good stuff. So
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about like the energy behind or the reason why you decided to write this post.
I wrote that post, Tim, because for the first time in a very, very long time, I'm going to say actually since I left Chicago, that was 23 years ago. For the first time in a long time, I actually had employees come to me and say, I have some good ideas about what we can do for Black History Month. Usually it is me, the one who is going to the leaders of the organization saying, hey, what are we doing for Black History Month? And in the article, you'll see I wrote some responses that I get, and I've gotten everything from, why don't we order pizza and just have everybody come in for pizza? I've gotten, great. I know someone who makes really, really good fried chicken. Maybe we can have that. So I get a whole series of things, and sometimes most often I've gotten, we don't have that many Black people that work here. What are we going to do? Maybe we should just have people volunteer at their favorite charity, which most of the times has nothing to do with Black history. And so it was refreshing this year to not be put in the position to push something that I always felt like people really didn't want to do, but it was more like checking the box. And so as I was thinking about how refreshing it was for people to come to me, I started thinking about incidents that happened in the past. Usually, religiously, I have people at my door saying, "Hey, what are we doing for Cinco de Mayo? What are we doing for Movember? What are we doing for different holidays or different months? What are we doing for
Yep.
Pride Month?" And I willingly and openly say, well, let's do this, let's do that. And our Black employees where I have been, they always wear their green on St. Patrick's Day. They always go out for Cinco de Mayo. They're at the happy hour. And whatever is going on at the organization, I've noticed that Black employees tend to be a part of it and they participate and they show up. But when it's Black History Month, it seems like it's crickets. Everybody's uncomfortable and no one wants to not only not participate because they feel uncomfortable, but no one has any ideas on what to do, and it usually ends up falling flat. Or you usually have just your Black employees at the event celebrating, commemorating the Black History Month. And so
Yep.
so that's what kind of sparked it. I wanted to put something out there since we're in this time period where we're having open and honest conversation to say, hey, what are we doing here, and why is this such an uncomfortable thing for people when we show up for everything else? Is this not something that we can show up for, at our organizations?
So William, when I first read the article, and one of the reasons I want to have this conversation with you was one, when I first read it, I immediately started giving excuses. Like I immediately started going, wait a minute, because you were talking to me, right? I'm a white leader. And I'm like, well, but William doesn't understand. And then I'm like, and everything I came up with, I'm like, excuse, that's an excuse. That's an excuse.
Hmm.
And so, but I'm like, man, I really just want to come on and have this conversation because, like you had mentioned, if we're being open and honest, I think what we don't see enough is the modeling of Black employee, white employee having a real conversation that's not like that we don't see in the media right now, which is just like people screaming at each other and but having a
Right.
real conversation around, well, why do we think this is the case? Now, one of my, I think,
Hmm.
excuses came out as, well, William, as a white leader, I don't ever come in and go, hey, let's make sure everyone's wearing red, white, and blue for Independence Day, or let's make sure, we get that, menorah up for Hanukkah. Like I have an HR person, right, that will come to me and say, hey, what do you think? We're going to do this. And so part of me goes, well, that's kind of their job. But like you mentioned, they're not coming to me asking about Black history. So then I thought, oh, well, maybe we're not talking about it because it's so painful. And you had a great response to that because the history of, was so painful. And so white people don't know how to talk to our Black employees about that, right? Or how to even
Hmm.
start to address it. And
Yeah.
so you responded, really around a lot of other issues that we face that are super painful as well, whether that's Holocaust or
Hmm.
Pride, something like that.
Right.
So,
and
go ahead.
that's yeah, that's kind of what because that's kind of what I feel. We don't have a problem with talking about the Holocaust or engaging even our employees in the break room talking about it. We don't have a problem with talking about Pride, the history of Pride, how Pride came to be. Is very painful for a lot of people. But Black History Month, and people assume that Black history is all pain, but it's not. We have a lot of Black heroes. We have a lot of people that
Yes.
we want to celebrate. We have a lot of Black people in history that were first to do a certain thing. We have Martin Luther King and that whole movement. That if it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't be sitting in the workplace at all. And so those are the kind of things that we want to celebrate too. It's not all about the Middle Passage of slavery. That's certainly a part of it, but there is so many other things that we can celebrate or that we can talk or even learn from each other just by having the conversations. But again, it's that you put that Black in front of it, and people tend to shy away from it. And I think a lot of people assume that I've heard people say, well, I've even heard this before. Is it Black or is it African American? I'm really not sure. And I've heard people talk about, the word Black is related to race. It's politically incorrect. Why is that politically incorrect? Is what I am. I am a Black man. That is a fact, not a science. And so I'm kind of in a space now where I feel like for so many years, we've kind of forget it, don't say nothing, just forget it. And I think I've grown. The older I've gotten, I've grown tired. I've paid my dues. We have paid our dues in these organizations that we contribute to 110%. And there's no reason why we can't say, why aren't we doing this? Because we
Yeah.
do it for so many other populations. It's
Well,
okay to.
no, and I really gravitated towards you talking about this is about celebration, right? When we talk about Jewish history or Pride or other things that have been painful, there's probably other examples I just am not thinking about. We're not talking about the pain and the negativity of it. We're talking about, like you said, those great stories of celebrating the history of overcoming and the things that have happened since and all the other great things that have happened to this point. And it's the celebration of it that I think is missed
Yes.
by most organizations. We want to say, "Oh, well, gosh, this is such a painful, horrible thing in our past. Let's just ignore it and not talk about it." And you're like, "Well, no, we can't ignore it." At the same time, I'm not asking you to relive slavery every single day for Black history. I'm saying let's celebrate all the great things in Black history, that we can celebrate from that standpoint, which I think is a different perspective than what most white people think. Now, do you love that I'm all the white people now? I get to talk for all white people, by the way. And I'm asking you to talk for all Black people. So no, I mean, obviously two leaders that have HR backgrounds who have dealt with a
Hmm.
lot of executives and a lot of leadership teams, and this is just kind of what we have done. So I think that was one of the things that stuck with me. What was that side of it? But I think you're not a person, and that I wouldn't say that you're super like aggressive after people, right? You're always just, to me, you're this great kind of even keeled, HR person, HR leader that I know. And so the post was like, you were like, hey, it's time. I'm done, right? It's time for white leaders
Hmm.
to step up. And so I took that call honestly to say, okay, but at the same time, I think I've learned over the last year with the social justice movement, it's not for me to ask you how I should do that. I just need to get involved and be more active with understanding what that is. But I do feel for white leaders that go, well, wait a minute, I'm an SMB, I'm a small business. I don't have any black employees, so should we even care about this? And I'm like, yeah, you still probably should. You
Hmm.
might not have any Jewish employees or you might not have any gay employees or whatever, but you don't ignore what's going on in society.
Hmm. And do you have women employees or do you have white women that work for you? White women benefited tremendously from the civil rights movement.
For
And that's
sure.
what I'm talking about. If you don't have any, and it's not Black history, it's our history. It's our history as a collective, as a people. And so, absolutely, I would tell somebody if they didn't have any Black employees, yeah, you can still have some type of program. You can encourage people to screen a video or open up one of your staff meetings with, how do you feel about X? Or, you can still have some dialogue around it and maybe someone might learn something. I think that oftentimes, and here's what I always, and here's what I don't think a lot of people realize. Black employees and Black people in general know way more about white people. um, I challenge some people to name me one Black hair care product. I can name you 50 that white people use. Name me one thing we know way more about white culture than people know about ours. And it's an imbalance right now, and I think there's a willful sort of ignorance that needs to kind of be dealt with, and it's not being dealt with organically. It's not happening organically. So we might have to push the envelope just a bit to get it out there.
I'll push back on not on you, but I think what I've heard from other white employees that I've worked with in the past, they're like, well, it would be racist for me to ask William about like hair care products or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm not asking you to ask him about whatever. And then we see like this whole kind of cancel culture that has come out, which I think has even pushed people farther away from connecting. And because when I take a look at you, William, and the relationship we have, and I take a look at our resumes, I go, we're way more similar than we are different. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yes.
yeah, you have a darker skin tone than I have, and you grew up in Chicago, and I grew up outside of Detroit, blah blah blah. Like we can talk about all those differences,
Hmm.
but the reality is we still have way more similarities with each
Hmm.
other as professionals as we do than differences. And so I'm always kind of drawn to that. The other piece of it is I want to tell people is that most of your professional conversations that you're going to have with employees, it's not Twitter. It's not the craziness we see. When I take a look at the conversations that happen on Twitter that many times get replayed in media, those are the people that are on the fringes, right? They're the most out
Yeah,
there in their beliefs and ideas. It's not the people that I would say are closer to the middle. We might have both voted for Biden or both voted for Trump or whatever. The reality is we're closer in the middle of our beliefs than we are on the fringe side of it. And I think that is
we
missed
are.
people are afraid to have conversations. And I'm like, wait a minute, you can have a conversation with that person. You're working in the same company. You sit 10 feet from them. You have way more in common than you have difference.
Hmm. Thank you for saying that, Tim. I don't think a lot of people realize that. People assume that someone. I was talking to someone a while back, and they asked me, oh, did you? All in the same conversation. Oh, did your folks own a home when you were growing up? Was your father in the home when you were growing up? How did you get through college? You probably had to pay your own way. Was it a special program that sent you to England? And I had to tell the individual, I actually grew up in the suburbs, quite literally in a house with a white picket fence and two-car garage. And when I graduated from high school, my parents paid for my college and they paid to send me to Europe, probably the same as yours did for you. And so, like you said, we are very similar, but a lot of people don't know that because they're working off old stereotypes and stories that they've told themselves about Black people. But I'm so glad you said that. We're probably more
It's
similar
it's the
than we
one
are.
nervous. it's the one nervousness I have with the remote work culture that's happened over the pandemic is I think if, when we're working together face to face and we're in the offices together, we tend to learn more about each other just naturally. But I do think that's one of the things that leaders can do during Black History Month too is figure out ways to find the commonalities just versus just the differences. I'm not saying that's all of it, right? Because I know, Black professionals that I've worked with can get fatigued with that as well. But
Hmm.
there is a piece of that where I get nervous about with the remote work side of are we pushing each other even farther away from knowing each other, and how do we continue to do that? I had my middle son, Cam, that went out to go, he accepted a job during pandemic, working completely remotely, onboarding completely remotely, and it's tough. I mean, you don't get the same level of that sponge kind of training that we get sitting next to, working next to people of all
Yeah.
different genders and races and everything.
Yeah, no, that's true. I onboarded on my most recent job back in September remotely. I haven't met my boss just on Zoom or my executive director. I've met two of my employees because we made the effort to meet in social distance. But you're absolutely right. Something is lost. One thing that we're doing is on Thursday we are commemorating Black History Month by we're going to screen a video made by Kamal Bell about being Black in America. And then we have a panel, and the way we marketed this panel is this is an opportunity for us to have open dialogue and discussion, about what it is like to be Black in America and also how that shows up in the workplace when we come here. And so we have a panel of about four different people, and we said that it is an open discussion. We can talk about anything, nothing is off limits. And so the employees are actually looking forward to that. And I think there's an assumption that, we can't talk about it because we're going to be offended. People are going to. Here's the thing, Tim. For what Black people had to go through, again, just to be sitting in these workplaces, we're offended by very little, and we have thick skin. And so someone coming up saying, asking us a question about Black history or something about being Black is not as impactful as I think white people think. We've gone through a lot and can't be taken out about it by a question about hair care products.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. That's an exercise that we're doing this week.
No, I love that. I think that's great. For those that are watching this right now, that Kamal Bell video, I think it's a CNN produced video, right? So I think they
Yeah,
can find
that's what
that.
it was.
If you Google that, you can find that, and it's a really good one. But I love the idea of the panel as well, and trying to open up that conversation and really trying to model what that conversation can be like between Black and white employees, but also we have the same issue with sometimes with our Asian employees, Indian employees, Hispanic employees, and in that those conversations have to be modeled, I think in the same way. So kudos to you guys for doing that. I love the idea, and I think a lot of people will probably steal that for next year if they can't fit it into for this, this
Yeah.
Black History Month, since we're almost towards the end of it. So.
Yeah. And kudos to the organization for not being resistant to it, for actually embracing it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to get us out of here. Any other ideas or items you want to share regarding Black history or regarding your post?
I just want people to, in the post, calling upon white leaders to, more than anything, be the ally that we need for you to be. And if you are uncomfortable with anything that I said in the post, I want you to ask yourselves why. And by all means, give me feedback and let me know how you feel. If you need any ideas for how to commemorate Black history going forward, I'm happy to share. But if it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, ask yourselves why, or let's have some dialogue about it. It's not meant to do that. It's meant to sort of take off the gloves and let's have a conversation because as a Black man, I'm to a point in my life where I'm tired of tipping around difficult subject matter for white people. Nobody does that for me, but I've done it all my life. And so I'm asking a question that I don't think should be offensive to anyone. Why are we not celebrating this month as
Yeah.
we do?
No. And like, and I did exactly, what you did when I first read that. It was really started to question myself of why am I triggered by that thing or why am I this? And there's always that part of it as a white leader. I want to say to myself, "Oh well, I'm not racist." But then you want to go, "Well, wait a minute. Then why haven't you championed some of these things in your career? Why haven't you done, some of those things?" And you're like, "Ah, you're right. I got to be better. Got to learn," and we'll take it from there. William,
Well,
thank
good.
you
It's
so
done its
much. By
job.
the way, I've loved your writing on Fistful. I think you challenge us in a lot of ways. This was out of the norm for you, in terms of how you write, because this was something very personal to you, but I also think very impactful to HR as a whole. But for those who haven't been a normal reader of William's writing, please go back and check out some of the stuff he's written. He's one of our great ones that we have. So I really appreciate everything
Thank
you've
you,
done for
Tim.
Fistful of Talent. All right. Cool. And
Thank
if
you.
and they
Thank you.
and also people connect with William on LinkedIn, and make sure we continue the conversation. William, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate the time and the conversation.